All right, looks like we're good. All right, welcome back to another edition of Cardinal Craze. I'm your host, John. Today on the show, we had Matt McGavic and Kevin Wright. Matt, you are part of the Louisville Sports Illustrated edition, and Kevin, you are part of a writer for Cards Chronicle. Be sure to visit both and check out what's been going on with them over there. All right, well, thank you guys for joining me today on another fun episode of previewing Louisville's next game. I know it's kind of been a whirlwind the past several weeks looking at the schedule per se. All right, so today we're going to be talking about FSU versus Louisville, game that's happening tomorrow, 12 p.m. I believe it's not on the ACC. I think it's on ESPN3 possibly, and I think another network.
Yeah, Regional Sports Network, I believe.
Sports South is what the Regional Sports Network is.
Yep.
Now, I just wanted to say, if any of you Cards fans have any questions for Matt or Kevin, just drop them down in the comment section below. We'll be sure to get to them and answer any all and great questions that you all have. All right, so we're previewing FSU versus Louisville. I got to tell you, the Notre Dame game really shocked me. The secondary for defense I'm pretty sure it shocked everybody, to be quite honest. What is your all's take from the FSU game? I know you've done several stories and different articles, but overall, what's your opinion?
I mean, I was pleasantly surprised by how they performed against Notre Dame. I know I predicted like a 40-25, somewhere in that neighborhood type of loss. I thought it was going to be a shootout of sorts, and then I couldn't be further wrong from what happened. And the defense ends up showing out, having a great performance, quite frankly, but then it's kind of more the same on offense. I know it's at Notre Dame and it's on against a top 5 team, a team that has no national title aspirations, but to see the offense continue to struggle like it is, I'm not going to say it's concerning in that particular game, but it's still slightly disappointing. They're still having issues trying to fire on all cylinders. Now, again, they did not reach their 10th play until into the second half. So in the same breath, you have to do that. Give it to Notre Dame's defense and keep the ball away from them. So we'll see what happens this week. I'm sure they're going to fire off more than 45 plays in this game against Florida State.
Yeah, it was a strange game, like Matt just mentioned, in terms of snaps. If you look at the total number of plays that Louisville ran against Notre Dame, it was incredibly low. But it was a strange game, in terms of the offense never really could get going. I think they had one, successful drive, but defensively, it was the ultimate bend but don't break performance. And there were, I think, definitely a lot of things to take away from that positively from the defensive side of the ball. So it kind of leaves you as a fan sort of in no man's land in terms of what to expect, I think, going into this week. Will Louisville's defense, will they put on another performance like that? Will the offense get on track? I'm not sure. They're going to have to score more than 7 points, though, to beat ACC teams. It doesn't matter who they play. I don't care if it's Syracuse or Boston College. They're going to have to find ways to score. They've got too many weapons not to do that. And so you just hope that at some point they find their rhythm and kind of find their niche, if you will. And so, but overall, I was surprised, like Matt was, though, that how low scoring the game was. I think after watching Notre Dame, and I asked myself, are they really the third best team in the country? I don't think they are. I do think they're a very good team. But with that being said, Louisville definitely, in my opinion, should have found a way to score more than just 7 points. I think that game was there for the taking, personally.
Yeah, of course, and you're all right. I mean, obviously, Kevin, you're right. To be in the ACC, you got to score more than 7 points. Now, looking at FSU's quarterback, Jordan Travis, who was actually at Louisville about 2 years ago, and they transferred out to FSU. It's kind of a sweet revenge story if we can win. He wasn't happy with the program. None of us were happy with the direction of the program with 2.0. And obviously, Scott Satterfield came in. He was able to redo the entire culture. He had a lot of guys jump on board immediately and was able to get into the 8-5 season that we had. Now looking into this season, we're 1-4. We're looking at the bottom end of the ACC ranking currently. But FSU, it really hasn't been doing that well. Personally speaking, looking at everything they've done, they've got better during the UNC game, but all of their prior games have almost been complete losses or utter shutouts. Now, for the most part, Jordan Travis has not seen a lot of snaps. He's had 63 attempts with a completion of 54% and only totaling 617 yards, averaging 9.8 yards per attempt, and only 3 interceptions. Now, mind you, he was not originally the starter. It was James Blackman, number 1 out of FSU, but James Blackman, like Matt actually said earlier, just was not, this was before the broadcast, but was not able to just find that completion. He was not able to connect with those receivers. What's your all's opinion on Jordan Travis?
Well, he's an electric runner. I mean,
Wow. Sorry.
no, you're fine.
You're good.
He's an electric runner. I mean, he does have the ability to throw the deep ball, but like Louisville, they've had some sort of consistency issues with trying to connect on those long balls, because I know I'm looking at the stats now. Louisville's only averaging 12.48 yards per completion, which is a far cry from what they were last year, somewhere in the neighborhood of 17. As for FSU, they're a little bit worse than that. They're at 12.09, and you said Jordan Travis's completion percentage. I know it's a very small sample size, but it's around the 50% mark. But the thing is, what he counters with that is that he's one of the fastest quarterbacks in the nation. I know Louisville's dealt with Tyrell Pigram at WKU, De'Aaron King in Miami. All they're good dual threats. But I think up to this point in the season, in terms of raw speed and raw athleticism, I would think that Travis has probably got the edge on all of those. And I know Louisville's had some success dealing with running quarterbacks at this point, but they're really going to get put to the test in this one.
Yeah, when Travis was at Louisville, Jordan Travis, he didn't obviously play enough to really get a good feel. And so him playing at Florida State was really the first true assessment I could give of him as far as in-game action. I know he got some snaps at Louisville and a game or two there, but it was kind of mop-up duty. But I've been really impressed with his ability to run. If I'm not mistaken, he leads their team in rushing overall. And so you're right. I think that, Matt, that Louisville is going to have to do a good job, just like they did with De'Aaron King and some of the other quarterbacks they face in terms of containment. Because if Travis gets out of the pocket, he's going to run. He's going to run for big yardage. And that's what you don't need against a defensive performance at home.
Yeah, no, of course. And so obviously this game, hopefully we can actually contain Jordan Travis. They're not going to FSU's O-line did actually really well against UNC, surprisingly. UNC actually has one of the best, or they were supposed to have one of the best D-line in the ACC, and ironically flopped, during that away game. And it's just so shocking to see that. So I guess one of the things is that we can look at going into this week, can Louisville's D-line be able to stop FSU's O-line, to be able to get those sacks and get those big plays like we saw this past week against Notre Dame, where we had Monty Montgomery, Dorian Etheridge go in for those huge sacks?
I think they definitely can. I mean, of course, some of the other people on defense, like a Tytrell Clark, like a CJ Every, Dorian Etheridge, Monty Montgomery, they typically take all of the headlines. But the defensive line has been performing fairly well so far. I know the Louisville defensive line at one point was top 10 in the nation in TFLs. Now they kind of dipped a little bit after the last couple of performances. But Jared Goldwire has been one of the top graded defensive players so far by PFF, and Desmond Tell's been doing really well. Dana Kennard's been doing all right. Tavarius Peterson's been doing pretty well, but together as a unit, they've been performing fairly exceptionally. Could they be better? Absolutely. But have they been worse? They definitely have been. So it's nice to see them perform at the level they are now, and it's going to be interesting to see them take the next step and perform a little bit better against this FSU offense, who is guided by one of the more electric runners in the ACC. While relatively unproven, he still has a lot of raw potential there. So it'll be interesting to see how they perform against him.
Yeah, I've been really enthused by Desmond Tell. He had some really good individual plays and snaps against Notre Dame. So that was really good to see, especially given the fact he's a freshman. And then you're right, Goldwire, who I expected to see good things from, has been just that. He's been really solid this year, so that's been nice to see. They'll need to continue that, though, obviously, this week, the rest of the season, in fact, for Louisville to have a chance to win games, especially if their offense is going to stay as vanilla and conservative as it has been. And so, yeah, I think the defensive line, at the beginning of the year, for me, it was a major concern. I won't lie. In fact, the defense in general was kind of a big question mark for me. Overall, though, I think they've definitely passed the eye test and done a pretty good job in terms of their lack of depth, but doing what they have up front against some teams that are frankly a lot bigger than they are from an offensive line standpoint. So I've been pretty pleased overall with the defensive line.
And I completely agree with you. I mean, defensive line last game was honestly amazing. I was really surprised to see Desmond Tell, like you said, and Jared Goldwire being able to work and flow so efficiently, as opposed to the past couple of games where Jared Goldwire has struggled defensively to be able to make those big openings for the linebackers to be able to get in there and you just work their magic. But I will say, Monty Montgomery really surprised me along with Desmond Tell. I completely agree with you. And honestly, the secondary, just hearing that entire game last week, all they did was talk about the secondary. Oh, the secondary looks great. They're coming out strong. They're, getting their head in the game. And one of the things that I talked about a while back was the concern about leadership and attitude and accountability within the defense, within most of the group position groups within Louisville. Now, is that still a big issue? It might be on some fundamental level, but they're working through it. And as we're seeing, they're actually able to progress a lot faster than what we thought they were going to be able to. Now, saying that doesn't mean that this coming game they're going to mop the floor with FSU. They're going to blow them out of the water, and the rest of the season is just going to be easy wins. And how did the U of L basketball coach Mack? I think he said it was going to be dropping the what was it? Going for the bomb or something like that.
Yeah, throw the bomb. Yeah,
throw the bomb. Yeah, I mean, that's what we kind of expected. And honestly, I am very happy to see that they are starting to do a little bit more explosive plays. They're trying to they're trying to mix it up. They're trying to add in new different types of positions and routes. And I'm just really excited to see this Louisville offense and defense going forward this season. Now, as we kind of look at the FSU side of the ball, rushing, they didn't do quite as well. They did well against UNC, but throughout the year, they have not done a very consistent job. What do you think some of the key victories are going to be for this Saturday tomorrow?
I think that it has, and it's weird saying this considering what the expectations were into the season, but the offense is going to have to feed off of the defense to get something going on that side of the ball, because up to the season, the best side of the ball has been, weirdly enough, the defense. Not to say the offense has been terrible, but the offense has not been nearly what we expected it to be. Like we've touched on many times before, the deep ball continues to be an issue, and other aspects of it, they trying to get it going, it's just not there. But it's not. It's a whole bunch of little things. It's not one major factor versus another. It's just a whole bunch of little things that snowball into one giant problem. Well, not one giant problem, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. So if the defense can hold FSU and at least hold them relatively well, the offense needs to capitalize on some of that momentum in order to get something going. Mm-hmm. That's just how I view it, because the offense up to this point hasn't done really much of anything to say that I can trust them to do anything, which is odd to say considering how explosive they were last season. But it seems like this year they've, I don't want to say regressed a little bit, but they're not as efficient as they were. So if the defense can do something, maybe actually haul in one of those turnovers that they almost got away with it against Notre Dame, maybe if they actually hold on to one of those, or force some 3 and outs, keep FSU on their side of the field, and if they can do that in the first half, maybe they can open up some things for the offense in the second half.
Yeah, law of averages would tell you that at some point Louisville is going to get some turnovers defensively and capitalize on those. And so they just haven't done a lot of that this season. I think they had 2 or 3 plays against Notre Dame where they had interceptions potentially and weren't able to make the play. Who knows how that would have changed the outcome of the game. I'm not sure. But against Florida State, I think I've been on this call with you guys on 2 or 3 different games, and it seems like it's a similar story every time. It's, don't turn the ball over. Play good enough defense to keep yourself in the game, and then let the offense take care of the rest. But after, the last couple of games, the second half against Georgia Tech, and then essentially the entire game against Notre Dame, there's a lot of question marks about the offense in terms of their ability to not just use all their weapons, but to find their stride. They just look a little off kilter. That concerns me a little bit, going against Florida State. I said a couple of weeks ago when they played Georgia Tech that I felt like it was on not necessarily a must win, but that it was a game that they really needed to have if they wanted to sort of fulfill their expectations for the season. Obviously, they didn't win that game. The Notre Dame game was a game that if you look at the schedule before the season, you may say to yourself, well, that's a game that you can probably lose and it not wreck your season. I just honestly never just did see Louisville going up there though and looking that inept offensively. I really didn't. So that causes me a little bit of concern. I think with them getting back home and with the defense playing as well as it did this past week, I think that may hopefully inject a little bit of life back into the offense. So I'm just looking for Louisville to utilize all their weapons, for Malik to hit on his big play passes. We have had issues hitting the deep ball. Now, obviously, that's important for our offense. I've been pretty pleased overall, though, with Javian Hawkins. He's a hell of a player. Marshawn Ford has done considerably well, in terms of the passing part of it. I'd like to see him do a little bit better job in terms of some of the blocking schemes. But overall, I think the key to victory, obviously, is just going to be very simple. Louisville's got to get their offense on track. They really do. I mean, they're not going to beat anybody in the ACC scoring only 7 points, period.
Yeah. Now, I completely agree with you, Kevin. I mean, looking at the offensive line, it really is very concerning. And as you say, we have a lot of weapons on offense. We should have been making more explosive plays. And you're right, going into the rest of the season, offensive line is going to be a big question. I did want to kind of switch over to recruiting real fast. We did unfortunately lose offensive tackle Zin Malkas. I'm going to butcher his last name, but Zin pretty much. And, he was actually potentially going to be someone who could actually walk in there as a freshman and play as a true freshman based on how well he was actually building his body. He was, becoming physically ready for college. Mm-hmm. Now, the big question is, how are they going to fill that offensive issue? Are they going to bring in more grad transfers, JUCOs into the next season to try and establish a little bit more depth? Because right now we have Cam DeGeorge, who has been filling several roles, and we have Trevor Reed, who has made a couple of appearances. He may not be ready per se, but he is he's a huge player. And I really hope that next season he really is out there in front almost every single game for the most part. So looking ahead, what do you think can be fixed going into this FSU game? Now, like you guys said, it's going to be at home, and I was actually just trying to figure out if it was going to rain tomorrow because unfortunately, the rain has not done any favors to this Louisville offense or defense throughout the past, what would you say, 2 years?
Yep.
And currently looking that up now, but I do want to kind of ask you guys, what do you think can be fixed over this week?
I mean, I hate to sound like a broken record. I think this is probably going to be like my third time saying this, but it just comes down to fundamentals. Now, fortunately, it seems like they're actively working on that because listening to some of the teleconferences this week from the coordinators and whatnot, as soon as the Georgia Tech game was over, their very first practice, they got it in pads and they practiced tackling. And then as soon as going into that Notre Dame game, we all noticed that they were a lot better with tackling. And then what they do after that Notre Dame game, very first practice, back up in pads, start working on tackling again. So they know that they're not operating to the efficiency that they need to be for not just one thing, but just a wide variety of like fundamental type issues. And they're working on it. So I'm saying fundamentals, but I'm hoping to see the totality of all the working on the fundamentals show up more on the field against FSU, because it started to look like that against Notre Dame, especially on the defensive side. Now we'll see if the offense can kind of work on some of their fundamentals, especially on the offensive line, because after such a hot start to the season, the offensive line has at points in time not looked that great. Where it's kind of like Jekyll and Hyde. The offensive line either looks really great or really bad, and sometimes it's because of the solo assignments or just dumb penalties. Like, I was shocked to see Ronaldo Brown in back-to-back weeks have unsportsmanlike conduct or one of those type penalties. I can't even remember what he did against Notre Dame, but it was enough to have Ledford get in his ear, kind of like he was in the Georgia Tech game. So, and they just need to cut on little things like that, which I undoubtedly believe they will, because they've already shown that they're working on things like that. But anyways, to summarize my point, fundamentals, work on them, keep working on them, and then it'll eventually start to get things turned around.
Now, to kind of jump in real fast, sorry to interrupt, Kevin.
You're fine.
Now, I believe, did he throw a player's shoe out of bounds?
That was Georgia. That was in Georgia Tech, yes.
That was Georgia Tech. Okay, well, then I believe this one was where he ran into a defensive lineman after the play was already called.
That's right, yep.
He did. The play was called dead, and he kind of came in behind and gave a guy kind of a shoulder shrug, in the spine, in the middle of the back, and knocked him to the ground.
And correct me if I'm wrong. That was on first down, wasn't it?
Correct.
Yep.
That was correct. So that's a big play, huge play actually. In a game where you only score 7 points, plays like that make all the difference.
Mm-hmm.
I think as far as what Louisville has to fix, I'm optimistic. Because the players continue to look or appear to be bought in. It's good to hear that at practice they're working on the very things that they didn't do well in the previous game before. But they seem to be, the sideline demeanor in the Notre Dame game, at least from the camera shots, looked to be pretty positive. Guys were engaged into the game and seemed pretty energetic. That was really nice to see. And so that's really good. I think that's good karma or good vibes, if you will, coming home for a Florida State game. So I don't see anything right now that's not fixable, but I think all they have to fix, and like Matt mentioned, and again, broken record, you just need to fix a lot of the little things, just clean things up. You can't afford to get personal foul penalties, sloppy penalties like that. We don't have a lot of margin for error. And you certainly can't have your running backs like against Georgia Tech fumbling the ball 3 times. You just can't do that at all. This team is just not built to be able to withstand that sort of turnover ratio. And so you fix that and you just do anything on offense. And like I said, just work on a few things and get a few things cleaned up. I think they're going to be fine. That doesn't mean that they're going to win every game on the rest of the way out, but I think they'll be competitive in every game and have a chance to win every game. And so it doesn't look to me like it's a lost cause by any stretch.
And actually, real quick, to kind of build off one of your points that you made, the media was talking to Des Fitzpatrick earlier this week, and someone asked, like, hey, you're in the middle of a losing streak. Obviously, you've been a part of something like this before in 2018. What's the difference between that season and this year? And he said it's pretty much like night and day. Like the attitude this time around is a lot more positive. Players are a lot more upbeat. Players are a lot more bought in. Players are a lot more focused, a lot more concentrated. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people seem to think, they're 1-4. It's just going to continue downhill. I don't believe so. Are they going to win out the rest of the schedule? No, I don't think so. I think that they might have one more loss in them, especially with Virginia Tech coming to town. They're performing really well. But the majority of those games on the rest of the schedule from here on out should be winnable games, if not because of just of what the on-field play is, but because of a mindset standpoint. Because they're still bought in. They're still maintaining focus. They're taking their one play at a time mentality, and they're actually making sure that the season can be salvaged. Unlike in 2018, once that FSU loss in 2018 came, you could just tell immediately from there on out that team was not bought in, and you don't see that with this team.
Yeah, I completely agree with both you all. And to kind of get back on that, bought-in process, and if they're going to win all the games, you know what? I'm 100% agree. I'm in the same boat. I really feel that it is winnable, like you're saying, throughout the rest of the schedule. Is it going to be a cakewalk? No. Completely agree on that. One thing I did see, kind of a rumor going around online, was that the reason that Louisville players haven't been playing as well is because the Breonna Taylor verdict affected them greatly, which is something I saw that was being shared on social media. I don't know if that's 100% true, but I want to be able to put that rumor to rest if it is.
I haven't heard anything of that nature, but I know that they've touched on this subject before with other games. I know when they made up the trip to Pitt, someone at Pitt asked that question. They were adamant that no, all the things that were going on in Louisville was not a distraction. Now, we haven't really had those kind of discussions and questions, conversations since then. So I haven't heard anything of that sort. But considering how distraught some of the athletes were when that verdict first went down, I wouldn't be shocked. But I would think at the same time that they're still focused enough to be able to still, stay focused on what the task at hand.
It's hard for me to comment on that because I'm a writer and I don't spend time interviewing the players and I don't get body language, facial expressions, that sort of thing. So I honestly have no idea if that's had any effect, positive or negative or in any way. My only thought on that is that I would hope the guys could set that aside and focus on that outside of football, and then during the games, obviously focus on what their jobs are, and that is to win football games. But here again, everybody's different. Everybody processes information differently. And so who am I really honestly to tell other people how they should feel about social issues? And so with that being said, it's hard for someone like me who's simply a writer and a fan from afar to really know if it has any impact or if it's even having a great impact on certain individuals or as in groups as a whole. So it's really difficult to assess.
Okay. And you're both right. Now, Kevin, you had mentioned, as a writer, it's hard to see facial expressions and be able to tell body language. Now, one of the things I did talk a while back with some of the recruits off camera about how they felt about the Breonna Taylor situation. And they were very adamant that they, on the one hand, they're very upset that it happened. They are hoping that change will come, and that they will stand together and not divided. But for the most part, I guess we need to talk about that on another segment. Hopefully we can get some of maybe some more recruits on and they can give us a little bit more insight into how they're feeling towards these issues. There is one player I do want to kind of single out who didn't get a lot of time, but I am kind of excited. He did get a small portion of the TV viewing time, which is Evan Conley, the backup quarterback to Mikhail Cunningham. He only had 2 attempts. He had 1 completion for about 2.5 yards a gain. Now, if I remember correctly, did he run for those 2.5 yards? Because I don't remember if he actually, I believe he tried to throw one and it almost got picked off. Is that right?
Yeah. There was some pressure in his face, so it wasn't completely on him, but I believe that one of his passes was almost picked off. Yeah.
Yeah, he's correct. It was a kind of a lame duck pass, if you will, but he did have pressure up in his face, so he had to get rid of the ball prematurely. And so he was fortunate, though, that the pass wasn't picked off. I will tell you that. It was the ball was up for grabs, and it was almost just like a 50-50 ball. And so, yeah. But, I mean, he does have great hair, so it was good to see him on TV.
As soon as I saw the beard, I thought, is there some magic going on? Hold on. Is he about to throw that deep ball like Baker Mayfield? Just, just shock us all into just submission. But I'll tell you, I really hope he gets a lot more reps. I truly believe, he doesn't have necessarily the best height. I mean, he's, 6 feet and 2 inches, but he has great arm strength. We saw that last season. We saw when Scott Satterfield was switching him in and out, when Mikhail was getting tired. This season, we haven't seen him so much. I know Scott Satterfield's trying to leave Mikhail in there, trying to get him all the reps, all the opportunities, as opposed to last season when he was switching him in and out. I was a little bit upset not to see that this year. I was happy to see him this past game, but I really felt that being able to give Mikhail some rest and giving Evan some reps would actually, help Louisville out pretty good. I mean, especially, for Mikhail not having to stand there for almost 4 hours throwing ball and, give some pressure off him for a while. I'm just not sure why we haven't seen Evan as much.
I think it's just because you want to keep the offense as consistent as you can. I mean, as well as Evan has performed in the past, and not to discredit his own talent, but if you are constantly cycling in signal callers, you're going to disrupt some sort of flow on your own side. And considering the offense this year is already having troubles with consistency and efficiency, I think that's probably one reason why we haven't seen Evan. And considering what Malik did last year, he was the second most efficient passer in the nation behind only Joe Burrow, which is a pretty good play right there. So I think that's one reason why we keep him in, because Nashville knows what he has in Conley, but he also knows what he has in Cunningham. And while there's some hiccups on the offense going on now, I think he's probably thinking, okay, this isn't going to last forever, and you want to just stick with your guy and allow him to think, yes, this is, no matter what happens, this is still your team, unless you do something egregiously stupid or perform outlandishly horrific that this is still your team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't. I like Evan Conley. I think he's a capable quarterback, but I just, intrinsically, I don't see that he possesses the tools that Malik Cunningham brings to the table. And for an offense that has shown potential last year and even in flashes at times this year, I think you want to try to keep him plugged in. That's Malik Cunningham. You want to try to keep him plugged in as much as possible with those other guys, with Fitzpatrick and Hawkins and Hall, and obviously Tutu Atwell and Marshawn Ford, to see that that their potential is reached. And with the offensive line play being pretty sketchy in certain parts of certain games, you're going to need a kid back there that can break down and leave the pocket and is nimble on his feet. I don't know that Evan Conley's slow. I wouldn't say that at all. I mean, obviously he showed against Wake Forest. He's got some wheels. But I think Malik Cunningham just brings that extra gear and that extra additive to the game. In general, I just think that it probably comes down to Satterfield's being very patient with Cunningham. I would hate to see Evan Conley get to play because Cunningham gets hurt, God forbid. I don't want that to have to be the reason that Conley gets on the field. I know that there's actually a pretty small, I wouldn't say small, but maybe medium-sized fraction of the fan base that last week against Notre Dame, at least on social media, that talked a little bit about where's Puma Pass. Is Puma Pass going to get any run this year? Will he get any snaps? The odd thing about that is against Notre Dame last year, if Pass could have just held on to the ball and not fumbled twice, he would have opened the season with a very remarkable, performance against Notre Dame, even though it was in a loss. He played pretty well overall. It just, the two fumbles were just backbreakers. And so I don't know what goes on in practice or in team meetings and in quarterback meetings and that sort of thing, but I know a lot of the fans are kind of like, is Puma Pass even an option now, or is it all Evan Conley? I still say, from like I did at the beginning of the year, it's Malik Cunningham's team to run from start to finish. It doesn't mean, though, I think you can't have confidence in Evan Conley. And it'll be interesting, though, obviously, after this year to see if Cunningham stays, which I'm sure he probably will, if Satterfield will work on packages or that sort of thing. So, but overall, I just think you have to have Cunningham in the game and give yourself the best chance to win.
Yeah. Getting into that Juwan Pass kind of rumor situation amongst the fans. Juwan Pass, from what we hear, obviously last year he had the foot injury. He was out. Malik Cunningham comes in and leads the team with Evan Conley right behind him. Come into year two, and obviously Juwan Pass is nowhere to be seen. And you're right, there have been rumors floating around that what's happening with Juwan Pass? Is he not good anymore? Did the regression from the foot injury slow him down even further than what was expected? And I think that there's a mixture of things going on. Juwan having that regression, then COVID happening, not being able to actually go into full spring practice and, getting some of that fall practice in. There is a potential that there was some regression. I'm not going to say for certain, but obviously if there wasn't any regression and he had potentially never hurt his foot, we may be looking at a potential, ACC championship from last season. Potentially. I mean, it's all speculation at this point because, again, he hurt himself and we really couldn't see the full Puma Pass that we were promised by 2.0 coach. So for the most part, I'm just excited to see if they're going to give Evan Conley a little bit more reps, just as in case something does happen to Malik. And as we saw, we don't want Malik hurting his wrist. Like I believe it was was it Georgia Tech and Notre Dame that we saw some wrist injury situation?
I know in Notre Dame he was having cramps in his throwing arm, and that's actually the reason that Conley came in, because he did suffer a lower body injury, and had it not been for the cramping in the throwing arm, Conley would have never even seen the game, because while he did get hurt, I think it was his leg or somewhere along those lines. It was to the point where it was still tolerable. But had he not started having cramping in his throwing arm, he'd just stayed in the game. Yeah. So it's going to be difficult to to see where this pans out, because as we know, Mikael Cunningham does have a little bit of an injury history, and we've started to see a little bit of that this year. And they need to probably keep Conley fresh at times for that reason, not to anticipate a potential Mikael regression, because I don't think it's coming, but just because of the simple fact that he does have an injury history, and this offensive line is so streaky at times. And at times it's shown that even the 6 people that the offensive line trusts to see meaningful game time, sometimes that's still in question with some of the missed solo assignments and some of the bonehead penalties.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is we're going to give our predictions for tomorrow's game. Again, that is at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be on ESPN3, and I believe there was one more. Matt, I don't know if you referenced it or not. Is it RSN channel or something?
Fox Sports South.
Oh, Fox Sports South, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was way off on that one. All right, so what is your all's first prediction?
I think Louisville bounces back with a win. I'm going to go with 31-28. I think it'll still be a relatively high-scoring affair. I don't think it's going to be a defensive slugfest that we saw last week up in South Bend. Jordan Travis is an electric runner, like we said earlier, he leads the team in rushing. I think what's key in this game is that Tamorian Terry, Florida State's preseason all-ACC wideout, I think he's still hurt, and I think he's going to miss this game. And he's a handful. So having him still absent from this potential contest is huge. It's going to give Jordan Travis one less thing to work with in the passing game, and he's already kind of streaky there. So it's going to be key for Louisville to keep him in check from scrambling out of the pocket, and to give credit to Keith. He pointed out earlier this week, the key player of this team is going to be Monty Montgomery, because he's played his tail off so far this season, and he's been living in opponents' backfields. And if he can be a spy for Travis for a majority of the game and kind of keep him in check, that could be the difference between a win and a loss.
So, I'm going to probably I thought about this, and I'm going to go with Louisville. I think they win this game. I had written down here 31-23. I just think that at some point, the law of averages have to balance out. I think Louisville's been on the short end of the stick there a few times. They've had potential turnovers that didn't go their way, or perhaps maybe even plays that kind of fell out of their lap. I think that overall, though, I think they get their running game going. I think they do hit on a few big plays against Florida State. I know their secondary is awful young. I do expect for Jordan Travis to come in and play fairly well. I think he'll hurt Louisville a little bit with his feet, maybe even with his arm. But hopefully the defense will play off the confidence that they gained last week in South Bend, and they'll continue to do that bend, don't break type mentality. It's not the end of the world if you give up some points to Florida State. You just don't want to give them up in a flurry. And you want to hold them to a few, field goals, obviously. But I really hope and pray that this is the game that the offense finally gets on track, and I think it will be. So like I said, I think for Louisville, the key is just going to be score some more points than they have been, obviously, and then you have to do that to win any football game. That's why I'm going 31-23 Cards.
All right. Well, my final prediction, and I hope that, like you said, Matt, earlier, and I'm sorry that I keep asking you and you keep sounding like this broken record, but yet you're both absolutely right. And Matt, especially the fundamentals, really, they need to get back into the fundamentals, just like they did when they first got there. And hopefully that the defense can hold some type of, resilience against the running game, against Jordan Travis being able to be that dynamic and on his feet. So for the most part, offensively, I am not sure what's going to happen. I did a full list of predictions earlier in the season, or actually before the season, and I was way off. Going back and looking at that, I was so off. It's very sad. I was very embarrassed about that. I think I had Louisville only losing 2 games to I think it was Notre Dame and West Virginia maybe. So I've been wrong on all accounts, but I'm just going to throw this out there, 31-7. All right, I think hopefully there's some jet lag. Jordan Travis just doesn't feel up to his game, had a bad mochaccino or something, and just is Or I don't know, it could potentially hurt him. I mean, mind you, he's coming back to a school that he originally was committed to, having to deal with all those emotions of being back there, having to fight against a team, against people he knows. Hopefully, I think the psychological aspect of this will hurt him so much that he's not able to do what he did against UNC. But again, I've been wrong from the predictions. So 31-7 is probably obviously ridiculous, but I do appreciate you guys telling me what you think. All right.
I predicted a barn burner against Notre Dame, and we saw that.
I was so happy against the almost win against Notre Dame. And let me tell you, Notre Dame fans, everybody looking at Twitter, all of those Notre Dame fans were so pissed off. So pissed off. And they were calling for the coach's job. They were calling for people to get fired. And I'm just thinking to myself, we lost by 5. That's great. This is how I always imagine the season turning out. But obviously tomorrow is going to be a big game. I pray that we get the win. I pray that FSU doesn't stomp us for a 3rd year in a row, and we can actually get the ball back in motion and hopefully look towards a more optimistic future. But again, let's hope for some psychological issues with Jordan Travis being back in his old stomping grounds, but who knows? He may come back here with vengeance. All right. Well, guys, for the most part, I really appreciate you coming out and talking to me on here, telling me what your preview was and your predictions, and talking a little bit about some Louisville football and obviously tomorrow's game. And I'm going to sign off here in a minute. We'll talk afterwards. But for the most part, thanks for watching. Please subscribe to both Card Chronicle and the Louisville Sports Illustrated edition. Watch out for Matt and Kevin's posts, and be sure to subscribe for more. All right. Well, for the most part, guys, this has been Cardinal Craze and Go Cards.
Heard.